Welcome everybody to another lecture. Today's unit is Manage Conflict and the unit code is SITXCOM005. Today we'll be going through all of the slides, so feel free to pause or revise any sections or replay at any time that you need to. If you need to get your head around something that you're confused about, if you have any questions, just come and ask me or your trainers, or email me at admin@wisemaneducation.com.au and I'll try to direct you the best way possible. Today we'll be going through all of the slides and we'll be conducting the activities as well, so feel free to pause if you need time or if you need to do something in between, and then when you're okay to resume, come back and resume the lecture. Alright, so let's get on with it. 1.1. Identify potential for conflict and take swift and tactile action to prevent escalation. So identification of workplace conflict. So you might notice colleagues arguing or ignoring each other in the workplace. Workers might also be resentful of staff members in a position of authority. Some employees are concerned about negative relationships with their co-workers. Then the productivity is likely to decrease as well. And employees may talk less in communal areas or speak behind each other's backs. So if you're seeing these types of behaviors, there's something wrong and there must have been some sort of conflict or some sort of issue between those people. So you need to act fast, because if you let this continue on, the small incident can become bigger and bigger and snowball into bigger issues. So other signs of workplace conflict include use of negative body language, development of cliques, noticeable changes in behavior, workers speaking out of character, use of emotive language, eagerness to leave the workplace at the earliest opportunity, and intolerances of other workers. So essentially they're not having fun, or maybe they don't want to be around certain people or be in a team with certain people, and vice versa, and essentially they're just not doing the work like they used to, and it's noticeable. So then you need to take steps to rectify these issues. So consider the following ways of preventing escalation: giving employees regular opportunities to voice their concerns and grievances, arranging meetings involving workers who are in conflict and highlighting the benefits of behavioral change, satisfying the personal and professional needs of employees, ensuring that workers are aware of laws regarding harassment, bullying, and other forms of workplace conflict. Now we're into activity 1. Identify 5 signs of potential conflict in the workplace. Alright, so we've talked about this previously. If we're looking at signs, there's so many to choose from, but yeah, they might be using negative body language. They might not want to speak to other colleagues. They might be resentful of one another. They might be arguing with each other verbally. You might notice behavioral changes within the workers and their teams. They might not want to work as like they used to, or they might not want to work with certain team members in a team or in a certain function or certain project together, things like that. Okay, so list 5 signs, and let's move on to the next one. Identify 3 ways of preventing the escalation of workplace conflict. So in this case, we can give employees regular opportunities to voice their concerns. We can make sure that all employees are aware of the laws in regards to harassment or bullying. We can try and arrange meetings that between the workers to see what conflict or highlight the benefits of behavioral change. and essentially see if they're being satisfied personally and professionally, and try and meet their needs a little bit more so that these conflicts don't come up. So just identified 3. Complete that and fill it into your learner workbook. Once you're done there, come back and you're welcome to pause the video now, and when you come back we can move on to the next section. So 1.2, identify situations where personal safety of customers or colleagues may be threatened and organize appropriate assistance. So you want to look out for signs such as flushed or pale face, people sweating, fidgeting and pacing, trembling or shaking, clenched jaws or fists, or speaking in increased volumes, or being loud, or being aggressive in some way. You also want to look out for shallow or rapid breathing, people's eye contact and the way that they're looking at each other. They might have like certain dirty looks, or a certain way of initiating a some sort of negative sort of look towards those other staff members. They might be showing a lack of regard for personal space. They might have an aggressive posture, or aggressive way that they're walking or doing movements, and essentially making abusive gestures towards the other staff members. The types of threats that you might be exposed to include confrontation or harassment, theft, break-ins, internal security breaches, bomb threats. There's so many others. They could be extorting you. They could try and leak your personal information, all those kind of things. So now to activity 1B, identify 5 signs of threatening behavior in the workplace. So in this case, if we're looking at threatening behavior, we're looking at people being a bit of having high energy, looking like they're gonna be aggressive towards someone, clenched fists or jaws, speaking in increased volume, sweating, fidgeting or pacing. They might be giving dirty looks, making abusive gestures, or having an aggressive posture to them. Okay. Right. Which rules should be followed when there is a significant risk to personal safety in the workplace? So when there is, essentially a risk for personal safety, it really depends on what the situation is. But if it is, between employees, we have to report it. So if it's something that is between customer and employee, we need to wait for the police to come and they can confront the customer. But in case of employees, if it's not too physical, we can deal with the aggressive behavior ourselves, meaning that we can get HR involved and have disciplinary actions. You wouldn't immediately need to. So once you've determined how aggressive or what sort of level the safety risk is at, you would determine who you'd need to get involved. If it's just a verbal squabble, you could get the team involved, but if it's something physical, you might need to call the police, depending on how serious it does get. If it's a risk in the sense that it's a continuing risk, you might need to suspend those employees. You might need to remove them from the premises, and ultimately you might need to take away their position at the company from them if it escalates any further. And depending on how serious the situation is, they might lose their jobs. So there's so many options there, but we want to look at state legislation in case of it becoming physical, if the police are involved, and it can essentially become an issue that you're not in control of anymore. So you would essentially take that, whatever the court or the police give you the outcome on, and then decide on what you'll do with the employee. But in any case, you would need to do a report on the incident, and essentially file that away, and review maybe at a later date what had happened and what were the solutions that were created for this to never happen again in the future. Alright, so include those in there, include some of your own ideas. Once you've done that, come back and we can move on to the next one. So 1.3, identify and use resources to assist in managing conflict. So if we're identifying resources for conflict management, we could be using our counselors. If we are a big enough company, we might have counselors in our own company, or we could recommend a third party join us, or have the staff members join them at their location. We could have internal security staff members help us, mediators, surrounding staff members, and ultimately the police if it does get really physical and uncontrollable. Government assistance. You should be aware that the Australian government offer various types of assistance for organisations with regards to conflict management. The Australian Human Rights Commission takes responsibility for investigating instances of discrimination, harassment and bullying. You should also be aware of the services offered by the Fair Work Ombudsman. So in this case, just do a Google search, go into their website, and there are so many articles and Q&As there that allow, or relate to whatever situation you're going through at your workplace, if it is with a conflict or harassment or anything to do, such as maybe you're getting overshadowed by other staff, or not being looked at or appreciated for your input to the team, and you feel underappreciated, or even being bullied or harassed. Right, outline the ways in which the following resources can assist you when it comes to management of workplace conflict. So in case of counsellors, counsellors will be a safe place for you to open up about your ideas. They'll help you have a better understanding of the situation and look at both sides. They can help you, establish coping mechanisms within any distress that you may have, or develop an effective solution with you to the problems that are coming up. Okay. For internal security staff, if you've got people, being aggressive, they can help you with that management, essentially breaking up any fights or keeping other people secure and safe. Other things as well, people feel that, you as a staff member may not be able to put your hands on them, but a qualified security guard with a security license may be able to restrain somebody, in a situation where it does become violent. For mediators, essentially mediators will act as a bridge between both parties that are in a conflict. They will allow both parties to have their say. They will allow both parties to, bring their opinions to the table and suggest why each of them are wrong and right, vice versa. And mediators will also, approach a solution. They're a solution-based, job. So essentially, they will try and get to the middle and get to a solution that is best fit for both parties, not just one. Other staff members, we could essentially, use them for, being a witness. We could use them to add to our information, add to our reports. Maybe they will tell us things that we did not observe, or they could tell us the environment in how the conflict was created, and things that could be external that we don't know about. They could tell us of previous events that have happened, or previous altercations that were not at the workplace. Maybe they have other information, so other staff members can also help us to if it does get physical, also hold down staff, or it just depends if the staff have been trained to do so. Otherwise, we would be if it does get serious, we would have to call in the police. The police, obviously, lawful position. They can arrest or take people into custody if it does become serious, and ultimately press charges depending on how big the issue is. And police are ultimately a government authority, so people will take notice when the police are here. It'll be much easier to keep control of your staff members if you have police involved, compared to maybe not involving them, and where the matter might escalate compared to if police are there. Okay, so include some of your own ideas for those 5 options, and then once you're done, come back and resume the lecture and we can move on to the next section. 2.1. Establish and agree on the nature and details of conflict with all parties and assess impact. Establishing the nature and details of conflict, you should be aware that there are various types of workplace conflict, such as conflict might involve physical abuse, verbal abuse, and the potential isolation of staff members. It will be necessary to establish and agree on the nature of the conflict if you are to identify appropriate follow-up actions and methods of resolution. You should encourage each party to give their perspective and explain their thoughts about the conflict. Causes of conflict. Conflicting needs, individual styles, perceptions, conflicting goals, expectations and pressures, conflicting roles, and personal values and beliefs. So if you're thinking about needs of one over the other, if somebody needs more hours and they observe somebody who might not need it get more hours, meaning more pay in their pocket, the ones that aren't getting more hours might be angry. Individual styles, people have a certain way of doing things, so if 2 parties have 2 different ways, one might say that no, my way's better, or my way's better, and then essentially clash in the way that they will conduct the task. Perceptions, that's an easy one. Essentially, people see things differently, people see the world differently. So one person might perceive a certain way you say something in a derogatory way when you've just said it in a joking way. So it's difficult with perceptions and people, as in everybody's got a way and a different perception to another person. Conflicting goals, essentially there's so many levels in a person's careers, there's so many things that they're doing in a day. So one person might say, no, I want to stay here longer and finish my work task, and another person might say, no, I have family at home, I want to get back to them and celebrate my cultural event or family event with them, so I don't want to work for 10 hours or 12 hours or 16 hours, whatever it might be. Expectations and pressures. There's so many, expectations and pressures that come with a career and a job. Especially, you might, it's not legal, but most bosses, they expect you to put in the extra, it's nothing to do with payment. It's just, if you're going to do the extra, they might promote you, things like that. And it's not something that we encourage. It's just how people are. People look into, who's going to do a bit more for the same. Those are the people that we'll invest in. Why? Because that's just the type of personality we want. We don't want the people that are counting every minute or every second. So if they, essentially, if that shouldn't be the way that it's done, but that's just reality. Conflicting roles. So in this case, people will have different job roles which might clash. So in this case, they might say their job needs to clean the floors first, but another person might say, no, I need to do this construction, you'll need to wait. After I finish the construction, you'll need to then clean the floor. But by that time, the person might not be at work anymore, so then that job is left, and ultimately the person that's responsible for cleaning the floor is blamed because they've left without cleaning the floor, but he couldn't clean the floor without the construction finishing. Personal values and beliefs. So this is very wide and broad, so this could happen with cultures, religions, beliefs such as, there's LGBTQ, gay, lesbian, there's so many beliefs, food habits, requirements, all these things. When it becomes personal, people can have a lot of ranging ideas which other people might not like, and you'll get conflicts from that. Okay, conflict situations may relate to conflicts among work colleagues or teammates, work areas, employee supervisors, refusals to follow directions or guidance, customer complaints or dissatisfaction, disagreements with members of the public, bystander behavior, drug or alcohol affected people, and persons suffering emotional distress. Alright, so we're on to activity 2A. In this activity, you're required to establish and agree on the nature of a conflict that has occurred in the workplace. It will be necessary to hold discussions with the respective parties and find out about their perspectives. The interest-based relation approach may be used for identification of conflict causes. You should record all of the key details and outline a potential cause of conflict. Alright. So in this case, you would need to identify first what the interest-based relational approach is. Essentially the win-win situation approach, where both parties need to feel like that they have essentially won, or at least not being cheated with the solution. So let's talk about a conflict. Maybe we're talking about Chad, one of our staff members. He needs a few more shifts during the week as his son has recently become ill, and he needs to support him financially. So he is saying that there's a 22-year-old, let's say Jordan, and Jordan doesn't need all these shifts that he's getting through the week. Why not just give, Chad some of these extra shifts that you're giving to Jordan, because he doesn't need those shifts. So essentially, you're trying to consider, so you want to put down what personal factors are happening. So Jordan is just working. He's able to work. He's free to work. He's been doing it for a long time. Let's say he's been at the workplace for 4 years. He doesn't have any family or things like that, and he's been working there. But Chad's situation has just recently changed. So as he needs more shifts at work, he's requesting more time, and he's asking Jordan to give him some of his shifts, but Jordan is not willing to do so. So now you have a conflict where Chad's saying, look, you don't need all these shifts, just give me some, and we can be done with it. But essentially Jordan is not letting go of those shifts. So in this case, we need to find a solution where both people can be happy. So we could say, alright, Jordan, we're not going to create a situation where you will lose shifts, but Chad, maybe if we don't have any shifts in your section in this factory, maybe we can take you into another location and give you some shifts there. Now, if you can give a better solution, yes, no problem, but essentially you're trying to have a win-win situation where Jordan doesn't feel like he's being cheated out of the shifts that he already has, and Chad feels like he can still support his family with some more shifting periods added to his roster. Okay. Alright, so note down all the important stuff that I've talked about in that section there. Talked about the colleagues, the personal conflicts, the shifting issues. We've talked about what the possible solutions could be to solve this conflict and essentially mediate with the win-win approach. Alright, so number 2, we've got identify 4 negative impacts that conflict may have upon your organization. So think about it. If there's conflict, less productivity. Alright. Another thing is you could get sued if it gets physical. Okay, insurance claims, the police, bad reputation. Staff will not feel safe in the environment. You could say you'd lose confidence within team members and confidence within the management. You could say that ultimately, the environment and morale of the company will be lower and essentially impact it for the long run. Okay, so that I've given you more than 4 there. So maybe you want to include some of your own, or you might, rewrite some of mine. So once you finish those 2 questions there, feel free to come back and resume, and we can move on to the next section. Okay, 2.2. Manage conflict within scope of own role and responsibilities and according to organizational procedures. You might deal with customer conflicts in following ways: refusing to serve certain customers, demanding that individuals leave your premises, contacting internal staff, security, phoning the police for emergency assistance, imposing barring orders, or you might essentially take the position away from them. These rules should be followed for effective conflict management: taking swift action to avoid escalation of conflict, remaining positive despite failed attempts to deal with conflict, identifying the respective needs of each party and being prepared to compromise, questioning and listening to people when they address the reasons for conflict, and refusing to engage in gossip and talking behind people's backs. You may take responsibility in the following ways: approaching the staff member or customers who are causing conflict, giving reasons why their behavior or actions are considered unreasonable, asking them to make changes, offering your assistance, assuming control of the situation, and exerting a physical presence, referring to other staff members when necessary. You may refer to these procedures such as grievance procedures, use of restraint and defensive weapons, control of intoxicated persons, records and information systems and processes, communication channels and reporting procedures, emergency and evacuation procedures, policies and procedures relating to own role, responsibility and delegation. Alright, so imagine, now we're up to activity 2B, imagine that a customer has become intoxicated and is acting in an aggressive manner. How should you respond to this situation in accordance with the scope of your own role and responsibilities? So if we're talking about, let's say, you're a manager, you've got an intoxicated customer approaching your colleague, and they're demanding a certain thing. You would essentially first need to approach them carefully and address the situation in a way to first check if the person is fully intoxicated, if they're coherent, if they can address you, and if they're paying you any attention. So I would draw the attention away of that intoxicated customer from my colleague and then try and get them out of the venue. So I would try and speak to them and in a way that would allow me to move away. Once I have taken them outside, if I have security in the venue, or if it does get violent, I could call the police. In any case, all this incidents should be reported. We need to document all that has happened and essentially try and console the staff member who was abused by that customer, and we should try to essentially see if she's okay, if she needs counselling, if it has impacted her in any specific way, or him, either way, doesn't matter. Yeah, so if they need counselling, we'd recommend the proper personnel who could help her out in that situation. We would then check up on the situation to see if all involved staff members were affected or not, if anybody was violently abused or verbally abused, and what actions we had taken in those cases. If we can't remove the person, we need to essentially remove our personnel. So we need to quarantine them in the area that they are, and we slowly need to move our staff away from them and lock them in or block them away from getting access to our staff members, and call the police. Okay, so I've given you two possible ways of dealing with the aggressive customer, so just jot down whichever you think, but I would suggest jotting down both. Okay, identify 5 types of procedures that apply to management of conflict within your organization. So in our case, we've got grievance procedures, we've got using defensive weapons, records and information systems, communication channels and procedures, emergency evacuation procedures, all those things. We're also trying to make sure we're offering assistance, assuming control of the situation, approaching all staff members and customers, any time that we may think that there are conflicts or going to happen or are in motion or happening, things like that. Okay. Alright, so we got the 5 procedures there, so include 5 from there, make a list. Once you've written all that in that section, resume the lecture and we can move on to the next one. So 2.3, take responsibility for seeking a solution to conflict within scope of your own role and responsibilities, seeking assistance where required. So seeking solutions to conflict, it will be necessary to consider the concerns, needs and motivations of any employees and customers that you deal with. It is important to spend some time considering any issues that are raised before attempting to establish resolutions. You should listen carefully and give summary of any statements that are made. A variety of possible solutions should be outlined in easily understandable terms. Conflict resolution strategies. The first option involves competing or fighting. Collaboration is the preferred method. However, it does require a mutual commitment to the conflict resolution process. The third option is to compromise or negotiate. If it proves impossible to establish shared agreement, then the issue might be avoided or denied. It might also be possible to smooth over the issue with certain perks or certain other altered or outcomes that can, possibly cool off the situation. You may seek the following types of assistance in such as mediation, employee assistance, advocacy, supervision, guidance by senior staff members or colleague support. So outline 5 strategies that can be used during the conflict resolution process. So we're talking about, essentially considering the concerns, the needs and motivations. We're thinking about what is important, listening carefully and avoiding any possible solutions that are outlined. So we're thinking about the first option involving competing or fighting. We're going to have collaboration in the preferred method. However, it does not, need. It does require mutual commitment to the conflict resolution process. The third option is to have compromise and negotiation. And if it proves impossible to establish share agreement, then the issue might be avoided or denied. It might also be possible to smooth over the issue with certain perks or other options or some sort of reward, or you don't want to really have a positive outcome for conflict, but it's more as in that it's understood that both sides are, as long as it's not negative, that both sides might be right and they can approach the project or action or task in their separate styles or methods. Alright, so number 2, identify 5 impact factors which will have a bearing on your ability to resolve workplace conflict. So we're thinking about things such as, are they willing to come to a solution? Is the conflict able to be resolved? Are the styles that are being used appropriate? Has it become serious and become abusive, or have they begun harassment, or has it become a legal issue? What else? If it's gone to the police, obviously then it's out of your hands because you have to wait for the police to give you an outcome. If it's become something of a legal issue, where it's a harassment based or sexual harassment or some sort of physical thing, you will essentially need to send this off to HR if you are not HR, and then make a legal decision based on what the workplace laws are. Alright, so there's so many there, include all of those there for the 5. Now we're on to number 3. Why might assistance be required when attempting to deal with conflict, and which options are available to you? So the people that we will seek assistance from is mediation or mediators, any employee assistance organizations, any advocacy firms or lawyers, any supervision or guidance from senior staff such as you, or any owners or directors, or any other people who might. This one, it depends on where we're coming from. If it's a conflict situation between staff members, then it's fine. But if it's something to do with the company as a whole, I would not seek guidance from senior staff members or owners or things like that. But in other things, if it's just between tasks or shifts or whatever it might be, yes, that's okay. And then colleague support, so seeking support from colleagues around you as well. So if we're trying to seek assistance, essentially it's because we can't solve the problem ourselves. So the reason is that we need help, and in most cases help will make the solution be found a lot quicker and completed a lot quicker. So with the help, we can achieve what we ultimately want to and have a resolution to the conflict that we are facing. Alright, so complete those 3. Once you're ready, come back and we can resume with the lecture. 2.4. Identify and evaluate impact of conflict on business, reputation and legal liability. Impact on business reputation. You should be aware that your approach to conflict management may have a significant bearing on the reputation of your business. If your efforts prove effective, then the reputation of your business is likely to improve. Your employees may become stressed and resentful as consequences of conflict. They may not collaborate effectively, and the levels of productivity might decrease. Legal ability. All businesses have a legal responsibility to provide a safe working environment and ensure that employees are protected against bullying, harassment, and other forms of workplace abuse. It is important that you take necessary action to ensure that conflicts are resolved without the need for legal proceedings. Any legal action that is taken is likely to place stress on the employees and the organization as a whole. Legal requirements: refusing the sale of alcohol to intoxicated customers, preventing minors from accessing licensed premises, refusing the sale of alcohol to minors, refusing the sale of tobacco and cigarettes to minors, preventing minors from accessing gambling areas, and meeting the terms of business contracts. So activity 2D, identify 5 ways in which the management of conflict may affect your business reputation. So if we're talking about reputation, you're thinking about the way customers see you, the way we are approaching our business reputation, in the fact that it might take a significant decrease in the way that our customers look at us. The efforts may prove effective, then the reputation of the business is likely to improve. But if if it happens the other way, this could cause more harm, where the internal workers may feel unsafe, or may feel that there has been a injustice done to the employees that were involved. So now internally the environment has become hostile. The employees may become stressed and resentful as the consequences of the conflict, and they may collaborate less and essentially decrease in productivity, making your business less profitable or in debt, and essentially you may lose your business. Alright, so number 2, identify 4 legal requirements that should be met by the business in travel, tourism, hospitality and events industries. So if we're looking back at the legal requirements, we've got the meeting the terms of business contracts, preventing minors from accessing gambling areas, so minors meaning anybody under the age of 18 in Australia, refusing the sale of tobacco and cigarettes to minors, so again anybody that is under 18 we cannot sell tobacco or cigarettes to. Refusing the sale of alcohol to minors, so anything that is an alcoholic consumable substance, so nothing to do with like hand sanitizer or things like that, or cleaning alcohol, but consuming alcohol we cannot sell to minors. Preventing minors from accessing licensed premises, so a licensed premises is a pub or a club or any premises that is allowed to sell and distribute alcohol. We are not allowed for them to access the premises, and we are not allowed to sell alcohol to intoxicated customers that we feel do not have the ability to make judgments for themselves. Alright, so include 5 of them there, or 4 of them there, and we should be done for that activity. Once you're done that, come back and we can resume the next one. Alright, 2.5. Evaluate options to resolve the conflict, taking into account organizational policies and constraints. The options for responding to conflict include: fight. Individuals may adopt an aggressive attitude and be unwilling to accept alternative viewpoints. So this is fight. Flight. Individuals may completely ignore or avoid disputes despite the potential for successful resolution. Then there's freeze. Individuals may choose not to take action because they are concerned about their ability to achieve acceptable outcomes. And then there's face. This is generally the best approach and involves addressing the situation calmly and with a planned approach. Consider these policies and constraints. So complaints, procedures, customer service, any disputes, exchanges, refunds, staff grievances, costs and budgets, lack of availability of replacement products or services, and organizational policies on refunds or exchanges. So activity 2E. Imagine that you've been given responsibility for managing a conflict between 2 employees who have different ideas about adoption of business practices. Outline the steps that you would follow in order to evaluate options for the resolution of this conflict. Alright, so in this case, first of all, we would want the parties to sit together in a private area. Okay, so that's first. Okay, so gather the two parties, sit together in a private area and mediate the situation. So then we would allow both parties to have a chance, an equal opportunity and equal time to explain their point of view and why their options are the best. Once both parties has done so, you would now then allow the other party to find flaws in the approaches. Then thirdly, you would make the existing parties to find the flaws in their own approach and see what could be the possible problems in their own approaches going forward. Then we would sit down to figure out how could we combine the two approaches and find a middle ground so both parties can be happy. We would then try and decide on possible steps that we could do to have a middle approach where both parties would have a understanding and have the same goal to move the business forward, and essentially both parties would include their strengths and try to remove their weaknesses as much as possible so that the ultimate goal can be reached with the business and be profitable. Alright, so all this needs to be documented. So all of the procedures that you've done needs to be documented, and the people involved need to be, in agreement with the solutions that you've come up with. Alright, let's go on to number 2. Identify 5 examples of organizational policies and constraints that should be taken into account when evaluating conflict resolution methods. So there's so many. We've talked about this before, but we can talk about customer service, replacement of service, or if we don't have any resources or any refunds or exchange, any grievances, if we're talking about disputes or any complaints. So just identify 5 of those that deal with the organization. So you could talk about staff complaints, grievances. You could talk about resources, budgets. You can talk about customer service, feedback. So there's so much that we can include. Alright, so complete those 2 activities, and then when you're ready, come back and we can resume with the lecture. 2.6. Implement the best solution and complete required reports. Types of solutions may be considered include addressing the root cause, appreciating each other's differences, agreeing mutually beneficial solutions, focusing on the problem rather than the individuals, being patient and taking time to resolve issues fairly, working to minimize conflict. You may address conflict in the following ways: asking each party how they'd like the conflict to be addressed and then taking appropriate action, compromising with the employees or customers involved in the conflict, giving apologies and attempting to move on, not taking any action and hoping that the problem will disappear. So the last part I don't really recommend. It's essentially something to deal with things that are time sensitive. So if it's something that will fly away, okay, no problem. But I would basically recommend the top 3 and not the bottom, because most things don't disappear. Complete the following records and reports: so incident reports, security logs and journals, running sheets, timesheets, task allocation sheets, record of conversations, electronic and paper-based information, radio and telephone records. You could also think about video logs or journals and things like that for your managers and supervisors. Alright, detail 5 steps that could be taken when implementing conflict resolution process. So if we're talking about 5 steps, first of all, we want to identify the problem. Second of all, if there are conflicts in place, we want to apologize to the person that is in the position of the affected. So if they are being affected by an issue, we want to apologize to them and then ask what the conflict is. We then want to find a positive solution for both parties, and hopefully the party affected will be happy with the solution. We then want to document our solutions that we have given and provide any feedback to the appropriate sections. We want to include all parties that are involved and make sure they know what has happened and what we did for them. Alright. Number 2, provide 5 examples of records and reports that should be completed as part of conflict management process. So in this case, we've got some here, which is incident report, security logs and journals, running sheets, task allocation sheets, records of conversation, electronic and paper-based information, radio and telephone records. So complete that. When you're done, come back and we can resume with the lecture. 3.1. Communicate with parties involved to seek and provide feedback on conflict and its resolution. So communication techniques you may use in conflict resolution may be verbal or non-verbal language, questioning and listening, cooperative language, appropriate use of emotions, voice and body language, constructive feedback, reflection and summarizing. Communication techniques used may be rephrasing, paraphrasing, presenting options, using language and concepts suited to the occasion and other party, showing willingness to compromise. Also using I statements, addressing the behavior rather than the individual, refer to observations rather than the judgments of the behavior, provide people with choices rather than giving direct instructions, ensuring that the environment is calm and relaxed when giving feedback. Respecting individual differences and attitudes, taking breaks if discussions regarding conflict become heated, identifying and asking for assistance when required. Receiving and responding to feedback. It is important for you to spend time reflecting on the feedback, actively listen to the feedback and take note of key points. Ask for clarification about any feedback which you don't fully understand. If you feel that the feedback is unfair, then you should respectfully state the reasons, providing supporting facts. Activity 3A. Identify 5 communication techniques which may be used during the management of conflict. So if we're using 5 communication techniques, we are essentially going to be using verbal or non-verbal language, questioning and listening, cooperative language, appropriate use of emotions, voice and body language, constructive feedback, reflection and summarizing, and many more. So include 5 there. Alright, now we're going on to number 2. So specify 5 rules that should be followed when providing constructive feedback about the conflict resolution process. So we want to make sure that we're spending time reflecting on the feedback. We're actively listening to the feedback and taking note of key points. We're being respectful to the individual and their differences. We're taking breaks in between. We're identifying and asking for assistance when required. And if the feedback is unfair, we should respectfully state the reasons and provide supporting facts. Alright, so state 5 there. Any 5 should be good to go. So complete those in your learner workbook and come back and resume the lectures when ready. 3.2. Evaluate and reflect on the conflict and effectiveness of the solution. Conflict resolution debriefing should allow you to review the situation and evaluate the level of success, identify areas of conflict that are yet to be addressed, learn about the perspectives of each party and ensure that progress is made. Evaluating and reflecting. If you are to accurately evaluate and reflect on the conflict resolution process, then it will be necessary to identify the criteria that should have been met. You will then need to gather all of the relevant facts and information to assist the level of progress. You may perform the evaluation and review in collaboration with colleagues and senior staff members. Alright, activity 3B. What is an organizational debriefing? How can it be used in review and evaluation of the conflict management process? So organizational debriefing, essentially it's a meeting where senior managers or any personnel with the correct information will essentially debrief other colleagues and people in the company about what has happened, what processes were taken, and essentially this will allow the colleagues to have their own input on the matter if it is not personal in the conflict or if there are no privacy issues. So here this is essentially the last process. So when they are being debriefed on the conflict situation, they will get a chance to provide their opinions on what has happened and what the possible solutions could have been, or how we did in the solutions process. So this is more of a awareness situation, creating awareness that these things have happened, and this is the possible solutions that we're going to be taking so that it doesn't happen in the future. And it allows for staff members to put in their input or have a say in the possible solutions and maybe correct them if needed. Number 2, identify 5 details that should be included in evaluation report. So if we're talking about an evaluation report, we want to make sure that we're accurately evaluating and reflecting on the conflict resolution process, and that we identify all the criteria that have been met. We want to make sure, so number 3, we want to make sure that we gather all the relevant facts and information, and then assess the level of progress that we have made in the resolution process. And we also need to refer and review any collaboration that we have made with colleagues and senior staff members, so then we can use this to essentially move forward. So important things may be such as what solutions that we've done, what the possible outcomes will be, so who were involved, what people contributed, maybe a review date in the report when we would come back and see how our solutions were, how effective they were, and things like that. Alright, so complete those. When you're ready, come back and we can move on to the next one. So 3.3, determine possible causes of workplace conflict and provide input for workplace enhancement and improvements. So causes of workplace conflict include difference of opinion, different ways of working, competing needs, cross-cultural issues, racial or religious issues, abuse of power. Workplace bullying, poor management, customer dissatisfaction, gender issues, and intergenerational issues. Topics that may be covered during conflict management training, such as management of challenging behaviors, negotiation, preventing of bullying, mediation, management of groups. Right, so identify 8 potential causes of workplace conflict. So we've got difference of opinion, different ways of working, competing needs, cross-cultural issues, racial or religious issues, abuse of power, workplace bullying, poor management, customer dissatisfaction, gender issues, and intergenerational issues. Right, why might conflict management workshops and training be arranged by your organization? First of all, we want to be training our staff all the time. So conflict resolution will always happen, right? There's always customers that might have problems, staff around us that might have problems, so we need to be trained on how to resolve conflict. Secondly, you'll always see companies have training or conferences happen when there is some sort of harassment, sexual harassment maybe, or cultural or bullying or something that may happen, and this is a common reaction by the company to schedule training so people are not, after this violation, are not continuing to violate these situations or creating situations where there is conflict. So, but usually it's either a reaction of a conflict that has happened recently, or most companies who are responsible will schedule training regularly, so maybe by scheduling a conference or some sort of training workshop once a year, so that all staff members are up to par and standards on how to deal with conflict with customers or colleagues. Alright, so as this is your last activity, complete all the questions, hand in the workbook to your trainer. If there are any issues with it, they will let you know if you have any problems or missed out any sections. So if you've got any questions after this, I recommend you get in touch with your trainers, or if you want to speak to me, send me an email or see me in person. My email is admin@wisemanageducation.com.au. If you think that you missed a couple of sections in the lecture, or you're more than welcome to revisit or replay the recording at any time. This will be available in your student portal. So the next thing I recommend you doing is the multiple choice questions. So this will be available in your student portal. Your trainer will let you know when it is. Moving forward, your trainer will also guide you through the 3 in-class assessments, which is your knowledge, performance and skill. So they will guide you through that and let you know when these will be conducted. So if you have any feedback or any questions, just hit me up in my email. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.